Stephen Robinson. Welcome to the Play Typer Guy podcast. My guest today is theater maker Jasmine Joshua, one of the brilliant minds responsible for the new world premiere musical Here and There, which will run at 12th Avenue Arts in Seattle from June 13th to June 28th. Jasmine, welcome back.
Yes, thank you for having me back. I'm so delighted.
Jumping right in, Here and There is billed as a non-binary musical. So let's start with the story itself, which has a classic American musical coming of age structure, but obviously with your unique twist. Can you tell folks about it?
Yeah, so our story begins in Butte, Montana, with Samantha O'Malley, who is about to get married to the love of her life. And as one does, is going through some RSVPs, and one essentially she gets a return to sender from a relative that she's never heard of before, and that her family entirely denies that they know anything about, which of course makes Sam only more suspicious. And so Sam looks up this secret relative, and it turns out that the secret relative is her aunt, the legendary punk rock singer Vicky Vector. And so and who happens to also be a lesbian and run a bar with her wife of 30 years in Los Angeles. So Sam goes on this internet search, and she starts looking up Vicky Vector. And when, I don't know if your listeners know this, but when you use the internet search function, they start to suggest things that might be based on previous searches. So the more that Sam looks into lesbian punk rock Vicky Vector, the gay internet just envelops Sam's life. And Sam starts coming across terms that she has never heard before. And in fact, she starts to wonder if she is in fact not a she. She might in fact be this weird new term that Sam has never heard of called non-binary. And the only queer person that Sam now knows is this mystery aunt. So then Sam goes on a journey to find Vicky Vector. I got to come up with a faster elevator pitch, but I do love telling that story.
It's wonderful. It's delightful. And, I'm a writer myself, so I just appreciate how well structured it is. It does hit every, I think a lot of criticism of kind of theater can be potentially that we aren't telling stories in a traditional sense. They call it, we're bored with the well-made play, but this would be something you might see in an independent film or even a mainstream film. Like it gets you right from the start of someone, here's their normal world and here's how they're thrust out of it into and it's all very relatable. And so it worked on me. I'd be like, oh, this is something I will enjoy seeing. I love musicals. I think anyone who's watching this will probably deduce. The question I think that is often relevant is what made this from all the types of ways you could tell the story, what made you decide that this needed to be a situation where people needed to break out in song? We've worked together, so you know that I always say that there should be a reason for people to be breaking out in song.
Oh yeah.
But for normal people, they tend to want a justification. So
yes, normies. So I was about, I'm going to say less than a year out of the closet when I came up with the story. And even though like I am not a self-insert, like I am nothing like Sam. Sam is actually like way I am very East Coast, and I purposefully made Sam more I put Sam in Butte, Montana because I wanted to show that like yes, queer people exist everywhere. And that a lot of it also has to do with just like if you can't see it, can you be it? Hence representation matters. So I am not Sam, but I have a similar story to Sam, which is that when I came out, I was in my 30s and I was already married. And in fact, I had children. My twins were 3 years old. And I wanted to write a story because a lot of coming out stories, again, we're talking about like your classic, like coming of age story. They start when you are 16 or maybe even 18 so that we can have you kiss and it's not weird. Like, but they're young. But what the hell happens when you're not? What happens when you discover something like about yourself late in life, and I wanted to write that story. So I also love musicals. I think that the thing about being non-binary is that there is no language for it. You know, our history and our existence has been burned and erased and denied for so long that we have not come up with a vocabulary to describe ourselves. Like we're starting to, like I know that like people throw the word nibbling around for like niece or nephew. I don't like that, but I'm also like I don't want to be cute. I just want to be a person. Or like I think like are you an aunt or an uncle or a like there is no word for me, Mr. Mrs. And then there's mix, but mix is kind of really close to miss. So for me, like that doesn't really help me. So like you said, if you can't say it, the next obvious thing is you can sing, right? So
Mm,
that to me was like the first thing. I'm like, I knew I wanted it to be a musical because there is just so many moments where it's like, God, I don't know how to say what I want to say because there's no language for me to say it. And I'm so, and, rather than go in like the realm of epic poetry, I mean, I don't know. Isn't musical really? I mean, how Greek is that anyway? Um, we went into song and I asked, I pitched the story to the Fifth Avenue Theater. They were doing their first ever inaugural story summit, which is like one of their New Works programs, which sadly now is gone. But the thing was, they said, we just want a story. We don't want you to have pre-written it. We don't want you to do anything before you get here. The only thing that we want essentially is your log line and your team. And I came up with this log line, and then I put my friend Heather Ragusa, who I have known since we were 14 years old. She's like one of my best friends, and she is an incredible songwriter. She never went to school for it. She is not in theater. She just has the gift. And what I love about her her songwriting, is that it is story writing. Her songs have stories in them, and they have really like they have points of view. And I'm like, that's a musical. A musical needs that in a song. And I think I just called her and said, I put your name on this project, so if we get in, you have to write a musical with me. And she was like, what? And we got in, and then we wrote a musical. That was a really long answer.
no, no. I think that is often sometimes a criticism of there's a term jukebox musical for folks listening who might not be aware, and their criticism is that often those songs aren't stories. I think that sometimes, I mean, a successful just you can find
Yeah,
songs that are in pop music that can tell a story and tell a story when assembled together, but it is a gift. It is a skill to be able to, um, and also to do both. Where some of my favorites, like Chicago, for instance, there are songs that um, you can hear outside the context of the show and it works as a song, but then you
absolutely.
put them all together and it tells a story, which is obviously very difficult. Sondheim did it very well, but
Yes.
um, and what you're doing kind of again with this character when we talk about with musicals, um, often it seems that plays can sometimes veer towards the masculine, especially
Hmm.
like things of like Mammoth and stuff like that, and then um, often in musicals, the classical musical heroine, there's a lot of those stories that are about obviously this is a non-binary person, but from where this person starts. So it's just an interesting deconstruction that you're sort of doing in that world. Um, and we're recording this shortly after the Tonys. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
Cole Escala had won a Tony for the first non-binary performer in a play. It's becoming some bit of distinction because those of us, we know that there's a difference between play and musical, but then there's some people who are fresh. Well, wait a minute, didn't people already win? Well, for musicals, so which is great. There are a
Yes.
lot of non-binary folks winning. It raises an interesting question, which I think goes to what I'm about to ask you, in the sense of like often the characters and the roles of certain characters in musicals don't necessarily need to be played by non-binary person, or could be. I think for Oh Mary, Cole's understudy is a cis woman,
Yes.
and a cis man, a black man has played the part, so Mary Todd Lincoln does not need to be. But how
Anything. Yeah.
how is the casting specifically in your um and here and there, and how have you approached that, and how did you write it?
Yeah. So uh, this is a great question, and as you well know, I love discussing like when does this matter and when does it not matter, and let's find out. Despite the fact that I run Reboot Theater Company, I actually think that the category of show, play, or musical where you have to think more critically about casting our identity stories,
Mm,
because the story is tied to the identity of that character, and the non-written parts of the show that happen that the audience sees are told by the identity of that person being in a situation. So that, because not every line's gonna be like, this is awkward because they're
mm,
this kind of a person. Like, you just know that when this person walks into a room, everyone goes, ooh, because they understand that the identity of this person does not match or is going to come into conflict with what is about to happen. Right. So, and we went back and forth about this. Alexei Safris is one of my very good friends, and he helped me write the story to this, to the show. And this is a conversation that we had a lot, which is, can Sam be played by anybody? And ultimately, I don't. At first, we wanted to be like, of course, but I actually don't think that that is true. Especially because the more we wrote it, we wanted to be specific about certain things, and because of that, that kind of identity um, needed to be say the actor's identity had to be the same as Sam's. Um, and once that happened, that dominoed a lot of other things. So, for example, um, Vicky Vector is related to Sam. Therefore, what does that, and has to be, is related to Sam, and Vicky Vector is a lesbian of a certain age who grew up during a certain time when, which is the like late 60s into the 70s, when like the women's movement, but like with a Y, was a really big deal, and that
mm.
lesbians were, carving out their own space in queer spaces, and were, we're wrestling with like what is a woman's space and what isn't a woman's space. And so they had very specific ideas of what a woman is. And that is how Vicky came up. And so what does that do to a woman who now it's in modern times? She's going to have different ideas about what non-binary is, because there is some tension between older lesbians and younger non-binary people, especially people. I'm going to use a phrase that I know isn't liked anymore, but like I said, we don't have any language, and I really don't know how else to say it. But it's called AFAB, which is assigned female
Mhm.
at birth. And I don't particularly like to be reminded of that when describing myself, but I don't know how else to say it. So I'm going to use it. If anyone knows the real answer, like put it in the comments or whatever, email me, like, because I'd love to know another way to say it, but I actually don't know. So in any case, like, lesbians have like there is a tension, because they're like, why aren't you just a butch dyke?
Mhm.
It's like, because I'm not a woman. And that tension is something that we wanted to talk about in this show. So I think having a cis woman as Vicky is important, because the tension between Sam and Vicky is it is important to the story. Therefore, yada yada.
It's
Um,
so wonderful that you are addressing that tension. It's real from people, people I've spoken to and interviewed. The Unfortunately, a lot of the sort of mainstream discussion has come from, unfortunately, I think from J.K. Rowling and others who have framed it as this horrible, the trans movement number has been sort of erasing cis lesbian women, and
mhm,
oh, this would have been a one, when I was young, she would have been a wonderful lesbian, and now, you know, um,
that's right.
I think that happened with, I believe, the actor Elliot Page when
Yes,
he came
correct.
out. It was a big dialogue around that, and so it's wonderful that you are, because I feel like there are often there are debates that are occurring, and if
Mhm.
we ignore it, like if you ignored it in your piece, then it would occur as if it's only being discussed in these circles, and obviously
Yes.
in a negative way, as
Uh,
opposed to being confrontational within your space. So, and that's just wonderful potential conflict. Again, I say this as the theater critic in me who have seen things that did not have conflict. Where's where's the conflict? Why should I care? It's
yeah.
like there's I think that's such a interesting thing, because you've gone from, okay, Sam reaches, has discovery, finds this person, but then there's a conflict when they actually meet. It's
Yeah.
really compelling.
Yeah. I mean, but it's very Dorothy, right? Like she goes to meet the wizard, and the wizard sucks. And then what? Right?
Yes, because everything is either Citizen Kane or
The
Wizard of
Wizard of
Oz.
Oz. I mean,
Uh,
truly.
so I guess that would be it. This isn't Citizen Kane. This is Wizard of Oz. I mean, both are sort of about identity and who you are in the world, but this definitely um, is in that frame. And I think one of the reasons I think Wizard of Oz has appeal to queer people, and I think people of or just different in
Yeah.
any way, is because the idea of, like, I will go someplace where things will be different, and I'll accept it. I mean, I think Wizard of Oz says it's actually going to be terrible. Please go run back to your black and white home. So slightly a bummer. Um,
I know, right?
it was all a dream.
God. We
There are no
have learned nothing. Thank you,
there
everyone. Good night.
there are no queer Tin Men.
No,
There's no queer lions. Everything is
no.
normal. Just go back to your life. Um, and so that question of idea, yeah, that's such a interesting thing you said, of like, because I've seen pieces where, like, the tension has been missed, that sort of identity question. I wrote about this with The Great Gatsby, the
Mm,
musical, recently, where Nick is played by at the time, a person of color, and it's the 20s, but, like, is it supposed to be the
mhm.
20s? Tom Buchanan is still terrible. It's like, okay, but he's a racist. He's a white
Right.
like, this whole
What are we
dynamic.
acknowledging this, or are we not? And if we're
It
not, the audience still sees this person.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't, the Jedi mind trick audiences, and this has been a big discussion for those of us in theater folks about how you do casting and so forth. I think there's a degree to which you can
Yes.
Jedi mind trick your audience. If it's Hamlet, everyone's gonna. If I show up,
Fine. Yeah.
if you or I are playing Hamlet, we get it, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's distant enough that it's
Yes.
like, yeah, this
Yes.
person's not Danish or a
And
man.
again, it's an identity issue. Like
Uh,
once you acknowledge that in the world of the play, you can't not acknowledge it with the literal human beings that are on stage.
exactly. So race and class is so ingrained in Gatsby. So how can
Oh
you not?
yeah.
It becomes strange. um and so here you need to have a system, because that identity is such a key component. um and not to give away others plot lines with this, but it is a would you describe this as essentially upbeat? Is Or it's not obviously a Wizard of Oz. It's not a Wizard of Oz, like everything just go back home,
Everyone
the
just
world sucks.
disappears. Yeah.
Just go back home. The everyone in the fun world is terrible, and go back to the normal world. It is obviously not that, but
No. Yes, correct. No, yeah. We wanted this to be a joyful show. I love a comedy. Comedies end well, generally. Um, otherwise, it's hard to laugh, um, which defeats the purpose. We don't have any violence in this show. And again, it's not that it is without conflict, but we were just like, let's have a show where the trans people are like, okay, you know, for fun. There aren't
yeah,
a lot of those. And like, I think that, like, with you know, trans and non-binary stories, like, it's so easy to make them trauma porn because that makes everyone feel good of like, "I would never do that to that person." Like, "Oh, how sad for them, but if I were their friend," and like, it gives the audience a way to, like, feel good about feeling bad, and we didn't wanna do that. And, like, really, you know, the conflict is entirely it's internal, which made it really hard to write. It's like, of course, the first musical I ever wrote, I had to write something really hard. I couldn't have just like done something easy where like we found the diamond and now we can sing. Um, um, so yeah, so like in the end, like Sam is okay. Do we know how Sam ends up? Like, I feel I want to believe that we end with Sam's beginning, which is like, I have come out. That is step one. That is not the end of the story. Now that I am who I am, what am I going to do? And we don't know. And we end on an upbeat in the hopes that, like, whatever Sam done, it's going to be great. But we don't know what that is going to be. That's for, people, the audience members to have cocktails after the show and debate furiously. No, I think that Sam does this. So yeah, actually, a lot of I've actually been really touched by this because I don't really think of this as a kids show. I mean, it's not a kids show, but certainly kids can go to it. And I've had parents when we did a concert version of the show as some publicity and also publicity / workshop really because I rewrote like 40 pages of it afterward in like mid-April, and we had like a lot of tweens there, more than I expected there to be, and they loved it, even though it is a very millennial written show and it is about adults. It's not people their age, but frankly, like there aren't a lot of non-binary adults, and how nice for them to be able to be like, "Oh, I can grow up into something." That's good. And so I've had parents also come up to me and say, like, "Is this appropriate for my 11-year-old who is non-binary?" Like, it says it's an identity crisis. Like, is this going to flip them out? And I'm like, I don't know, because it's an identity crisis, but like your kid knows. That's why the kid probably wants to see it. Like it is an identity crisis because there aren't a lot of examples of like what it looks like. When I came out at 33, I was the oldest non-binary person that I knew. I didn't know what it meant. Like I suddenly became like a technical queer elder, even though I was the newest. Like, I mean, I knew
Mm.
people who were in their 20s were like, "Oh yeah, I've been non-binary since I was 15." And I'm like, well, I just heard about it yesterday and I am twice your age. Great. Like when I was 15, I still had another 15 years before I had even heard of it. So, and it's just a different thing. I'm excited for younger people who have maybe heard about it for longer than I have in their lifespan to come and see the show and still be able to like have a connection to it, even though it is written from this perspective of someone who, as we say in the show, flew north a little late.
And so for writing a musical, you how do I put this delicately? You sort of approach this with like no holds bars, right? Because it's very, I mean, musicals are very expensive, especially if you have a large cast. You've got choreographers, you've got to get people who can sing, and you've got a band. And from what understand, you kind of, I'm going to write my story and then figure out how to sort of affordably mount it. Is that true? Or
Yeah. This is another thing. Again, this isn't the first full length musical I've ever written. And I just wrote it like I wanted to write it. I did not write it thinking like commercially, musicals are easily more produced if it's 4 or less people. Um, and that is just true because they are very expensive to do. And an easy way to cut costs, much like your wedding guest list, is to cut people. So like, you cut the guest list, right? So you just so smaller casts is really how you streamline it. Originally there were 16 people in it and we cut it down to 10. So you can do the show with 10. I figured out what the doubling tracks are, and that is how we've been pitching it. And once we hit wall after wall, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. And then tell you what, I'm gonna add a 6-person ensemble because that's fun, and like no one's gonna tell me no. Like the producer is me and I say do it. I'm certainly not paying them, no one is getting living wage, but everyone gets a stipend. Um, and yeah, we're doing the best that we can with $35,000, which sounds like a lot of money until you've ever produced a
Oh
show.
yes.
The venue itself, just the venue for performances, is 9,000. So really, I'm doing this with about 25, $24,000. Um,
Well, but you've managed musicals, so this is not
yes,
far. You're not going crazy right now. A few days before you launch,
no.
you feel good, right?
Yeah, I do feel good. There are some things. This venue, it's at 12th Avenue Arts, which is in Capitol Hill. It is a great space. It's a great location. I chose it because I was like, oh man, a non-binary musical in June in Capitol Hill, perfect. But this was not built, as many spaces in Seattle's are not, wasn't really built for live music. And so fortunately I have an incredible sound team who is like, aha, we need a blah, 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 blah. And then I say, give me the list and I will go and find those things that will make this work. So we're figuring it out, but it has not been a plug and play just because like I've never worked in that venue before. And we're trying to figure out how to get 16 people on mics and a 5-person rock band to not blast everyone to smithereens and or feedback and all that stuff. But it's going really well. Like I have to say, like from a directing perspective, and I don't know, have you ever directed any of your own work?
No, I've
It's
I've
weird.
I trust. Yeah, I've thrown it to people like you who know what they're doing, and
It's a
I
weird thing
have
to do.
I have written often with an awareness
Mhm.
of kind of cost.
Sure.
Because you were saying, like, I remember seeing something recently where there's it's a play where like a major character doesn't appear until like late in the last act or something, and it just be like, okay, well, that actor is gonna have to be the kid at the beginning, right? Walk on your knees or whatever,
Right, yeah.
wear
Pitch
some
your voice.
pigtail,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
everyone's got to be doing something for the whole
Yeah,
weekend.
like I can correct, right? Uh-huh. Yeah, like I will say like my first draft of this, as I refined it over the last like 7 years, like we definitely started paring down locations because as I directed more, I was like, yeah, we, everything takes place in the bar.
Yeah,
We have 2 locations with a couple of like, we'll just put it downstage left, like roll on a desk and put a special on it, and there's the office or whatever it is. Yeah, because like that I think that having that kind of a brain is important. The only thing that I kept from my wild imaginations in the script, and I just refused to change it until I someone with millions of dollars decides to do it, is the first time Sam discovers Vicky Vector. It's an internet search, of course, right? So Sam's on the phone, is like, ooh, like Vicky Vector search, and then the set explodes in a Vicky Vector music video. And
uh,
I had written in the script, Vicky Vector emerges from the wall on top of a red convertible. And it's in the script still. I mean, I don't know.
imagine that's happening. That's for the actor.
Right?
Imagine that's
Yeah,
how
it's
your
like
version.
that is the like that's the vision. Spoiler, she doesn't.
There's no red convertible.
No,
Um,
we have not reached that budget point. But I'm like, I don't know, I'll keep it in the stage directions. If someone feels the need to like get a red car and burst through a wall on stage, don't see why I should be the one to tell them no.
I mean, that's been one of the issues because with I mean, plays are structured so it's all in a bar or
A
in an
living room
office
or
building
whatever.
or living room, and then especially on Broadway, you get George Clooney or Hugh Jack or to play in that, and then it's your overheads here, and then you're going to be charging $9 a ticket. Where musicals, the expectation has always been, for things like Wicked or Death Becomes Her, disappointing things behind me. It's like you know great costume
Yeah.
changes and every end. Um, so to the people like me out there who have seen kind of, okay, this might have been more than you could have achieved, like, because if you see sort of Anything Goes or you see Chicago, and even a stripped down in Chicago, if it's not, there's sort of the physical set and then there's sort of the human special effects. If you can't get the humans to sing and dance at this sort of level, it doesn't really come together well. um So what's your how would you approach other people who are skeptical about the ability of, you know, economical a musical, like, that it can be done like a play and still hit all those beats?
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, I hate to say this to writers, but like, I think that it is important to keep in mind the medium to which you are writing. Um, you should just keep it in mind. Like, I would say, and that sometimes just includes, like, you know, yes, the dream is that immediately, whatever, like the Manhattan Theater Club is going to be like, yes, I will pluck you from obscurity and throw you onto the stage and you can have whatever you want. And the fact is, it's not impossible, but it is perhaps improbable. And I think that if you want to see your work sooner, keeping in mind that, like, the way you're going to be able to see it sooner is to write with, again, the medium that you are writing for in mind, especially if you want something that's taking place in a realistic world. If you're writing SpongeBob SquarePants, like, once you're under the sea, you can do whatever you want, right?
And I was just about to ask you about your the team you've assembled to do this. You've mentioned Heather. Can you tell folks about everyone else? Because obviously to do a music, you've got a choreographer, you've got musical directors, and so forth. Like, can you tell us about your team, how you found them, and what they bring?
Yeah. So yeah, so Heather, obviously I found because we used to sing together all the time, and she just became this incredible songwriter. And I just knew, I was like, man, I actually, before I wrote Here and There, I tried to write a jukebox musical to the songs that her and I used to sing to, which was, I haven't given up on it yet, but it is not really ready for consumption, just because I still have to. It's jukebox musicals are hard. Creating a show that perfectly balances, which is why, like, there are a few, frankly, that are, how the French say, good. Um, like, I think Jersey Boys is probably the most successful, and it's successful because it is the people in the play singing the actual songs that they actually sing. They
Mhm.
sang, and it's this biopic kind of a thing. But like, that awkward thing where you're like, this song isn't about what's happening, but it sort of is, like. And even though, so it was a hard thing to do, but that's where I was like, Heather, like, you can write songs for musicals. So that's how I got Heather. Alexei is just like, I knew I wanted this to be a comedy about like trans and gender nonconforming people. And I asked Alexei because Alexei was one of the first people I knew, like one of the first non-binary people that I had ever met. And I was like, help me balance, like, the naivety of the Sam character, and like help me create this world, because I'm still learning it as I'm writing it. And I want someone to help me, also be immersed in that culture that I am new to, right? And also, again, comedy, and Alexei's hilarious. So I was like, great, we're not gonna like veer into the, like, this has now become an O'Neill play where it's like, like rending up garments. So that was like how I knew I wanted to like do this. The creative team is that, like, I wanted it to be people who I loved and knew, because especially since this is such a personal story, and you know a story that was very, yeah, I mean, personal and meaningful to me. So like, I wanted to feel safe in the womb.
I think as artists, it's sort of important to be like, it's okay to give people escapism. That's not a terrible thing. You're not cheapening your work if you do that, and you can tell important stories. Um, having fun at the theater,
Yeah,
own sort of.
absolutely. I mean, we make all of the, like, dysphoric, I mean, we have several dysphoric moments in this show, and I'd like to believe that some of them are funny. Like, we wanted them to be funny because, you know, comedy is tragedy plus time, right?
Mhm.
And like, there are some that aren't funny, and the some where, like, we do hit, but like, we have a lot of, I'm a very cheap, I'm a cheap laugh. And I, like, to me, we have this whole scene, like, right after Sam has that moment of like, oh my God, I think I'm non-binary. And all of a sudden, like, is there a lot of pink in here? Am I like, has it always been like this? Like, I haven't realized it. And then we immediately have like a bridal shower. and everyone's coming on singing a song that is a derivative of Pachelbel's canon. And Sam is like in this existential hell with everyone like, like femming it up. And Sam is like, oh my God, this would not have been a problem the day before I found out. Right. So like stuff like that, where it's like, yes, in the moment, that is, I mean, for people who like, there, when you're coming out as non-binary and you're rubbing up against like, why does this hurt all of a sudden? It's because I see it now and I didn't before, or I thought it was my problem and now I'm realizing it's not my problem. It's my surroundings hurt me. And so like those instances happen, and in the moment they are not funny, but I'm hoping that like people who've been through it will be like, ooh, yep, and the cathartic laugh of that, of like, oh my God. Or like the first time you try something on that feels euphoric. I mean, I think a lot of trans people have this, like, what was the first outfit that you picked out
Oh yeah.
for yourself? And they're always bad because you don't know what you're doing. Like,
I know a lot of theaters are facing issues, the current administration with the NEA, with getting funding and so forth. Has any of that impacted you as far as grants or funding, or have you been sort of kind of never relied on that previously?
For this project, not at all, because I decided to do it like last July. And unfortunately, a lot of the big project grants, like you apply for them now for next year. So I had missed a lot of the deadlines for 2025. And some of the smaller grants are, I think that some of the fallout from the Trump administration, what they're doing to the arts in this country and grant giving, is that one, like grants are getting very specific, which is great for those specific things that they serve. But two, they are getting very competitive because everyone knows like this could be the last time we get anything. The Open Doors grant in Washington was a boon. I am glad it is from the state and that the state cares about all kinds of people. So from Reboot's perspective, like we get a lot of state government grants. We didn't get a lot of federal grants because we aren't quite like big enough to go after those. So like fortunately we were not affected by that. But now we know like orgs that did get those, they're coming after the state money now and the more local. So we're just gonna have more people going after the same pool of money that we had before. So that, I think, it hasn't affected us yet. Well, I shouldn't say that. What it's affecting is our planning. Because now it's like, okay, like we were thinking about adding onto our programming. Maybe we shouldn't, because I don't know if we can pay for it. And if we blow it all, we don't know if we're going to get replenished with grants. So like we're kind of freezing, and like maybe we just like we keep what we have and we hold the line and hope that someday, it gets better, so to speak. But yeah, like for this project, not really, only just, the morale of all of the trans and gender non-conforming people who are involved in the show. This is a place to come where it's like, it was another reason why I'm like, I really want this to be joyful. And actually we got a lot of feedback and have always got a lot of feedback about like, we don't want this to be a happy ending. Why is it so pat? And I'm like, first of all, I don't think it's pat. I think so, and I'm the only one that matters. But like, you know what I mean? I don't think that it's pat. I mean, I really don't. I think that, yes, it is a happy ending. And you know what? No one complains about the 80th millionth romantic comedy that has a happy ending. Why can't we have a happy ending? Because it's not realistic. And why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Maybe it's okay that, you know what, it could end up nicely. Do I know that's not the reality? I mean, it's another thing. Sam's story is not my story. I did have family members who did not like what I did. And by what I did, I mean, say who I am. So I understand that. And I got off easy. There are people in my cast who did not get off easy when they came out. They know that. I know that. And anyone who has a working brain and cares about the queer community knows. So can't we just for 2.5 hours live in a world where, like, you know what, this one story, it's okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Um,
I don't know. Like, but I even in April, people are like, I don't know. That doesn't seem realistic. I'm like, how would you like me to end this then? You want to hurt
yeah.
Sam?
Well,
Why? What's wrong with you? To prove that that's what really happens? How does that help? What does
well,
that do?
kill your queers has been a long standing, and I'm not someone who cancels because everything changes, our growth changes, so I don't hold
Sure.
it against. But as someone who was in their 20s and the 90s, and I've seen how many plays I saw,
Oh
again,
my God. Yeah.
well meaning people, but like, and being me, if you can imagine me in my 20s, it's like, oh, the lady's best friend is gay, he's dead by the end of this, because
Yeah.
that will give the romantic comedy. So when she gets married at the end, it'll be you've said that her gay best
But at
friend
least we
died.
killed someone. Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
come
there's
on.
some depth, and that's
Jesus.
so often is sort of the cheapest way. Whereas Angels in America dealt with like a very serious issue, but it was at the time, it's like he doesn't die. We're leaving it up like, I'm
Yeah.
still going to be around, I'm still
Yes.
living.
Yes.
um and I think there's definitely depth, there's that stuff that's realistic. um I think artists, we sometimes gotten stuck in doing model minority stuff, in a sense of, if we
Mm,
present ourselves as perfect, people will like us, and then that can backfire, because then the only people who are shown as so struggling in the world are rural white people from,
yeah.
and
That's
then
right.
whenever time you only time you see gay people, it's like Will and Grace, which I liked, but, or the power lesbian couple, um, remodeling on HGV $1 billion home. And
Sure.
so
Sure.
you're like,
Sure.
well, why are these people complaining? They're better off than I am, right? And it's like, well, no,
Mm,
actually, statistically speaking, queer people have more financial issues, but especially when you're thrown out of your homes at 16, that can be tough for
yeah.
financial stability for later buying a home and remodeling it. So I think, but the balance is, and I think it helps, is you're telling the story, so you can address. It's not easy. It's tough. We have the same struggles that you're having. We laugh about those struggles like you
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
and we live and we exist. But at the same time, we don't need to do trauma porn to prove that life is tough. I think that there's the balance is what is key. So I was excited about seeing with
Yeah.
your play.
Yay. Yeah. Another thing I want to talk about. So, like, when we picked Butte, Montana, to be the starting place for Sam, um, the one thing before we set this, let's just make sure that if I were to have a diverse cast, that is not inaccurate to Butte, Montana, because I think that that's patronizing. And
Mhm.
also is selfish. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, if I wanted a diverse cast, then put it somewhere. But the point more was that we wanted to be in a rural place that wasn't in a necessarily a blue state.
Yeah.
It's to have that contrast to Los Angeles, right? So I did research on it, and actually, I mean, I became kind of my dramaturgical dive. Like, I became kind of a nerd about it, because Butte is actually really cool. Like, its
Oh
history
yeah.
is very cool. It's a fascinating place, and there is actually there was a huge Chinese population there because the railroad was going through there because it's a mining town and they needed all this equipment. And there's a place, and it's very similar to the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle, called the Meiwa Society, and they are kind of like the keepers of like the cultural stories and history of Chinese people in Butte, Montana. And there used to be like, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a count, but they have done archaeological digs to think like there could have been like thousands of Chinese people living here. But the issue was that the census, the federal government taxed not white people to count them in the census. So when the census board came through, the Chinese people were like, we're just going to go hide. And when they leave, we'll come back. So like there was never an accurate count. They'd be like, there are two. But like clearly there was a bustling Chinatown with like layers and layers and like years and years of like people living there. But they were never counted because they basically were like, oh, when they're coming, great. We're all just gonna go and like have a snack in the woods, I guess, and then we'll be back when they're gone. Like, and they discovered this, and it's like this really like like the Miwa Society, it's like their website is great. I've read a lot about it. So because of that, what I purposefully made characters that are canonically Chinese American, and it is to say like they exist in Butte. Just because you think of Butte, Montana as a white Irish city, which it is, um, doesn't mean that other people don't exist, which is also like so much the thesis of the show. It's like everybody can exist everywhere, yo.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
that is a thing that we should all be aware of. I in the production that I am directing, Sam is white. I don't see why necessarily Sam has to be. The reason why that is because again, it comes back to being an identity play, and I do not have a BIPOC queer experience, and it is different than a white
Mm-hmm.
queer experience. And I didn't feel comfortable directing a show. And like, if I were to do it, like, and we've talked to other, Mantio, who is like this incredible director. And they wanted to direct it, and they're like, can I cast Sam however I want? I'm like, absolutely, because I trust you to understand with this other actor how you're going to build this. And then I, as the writer in the room, like, I'm happy to adjust, especially in a world premiere, like the language or like moments that like
Mm-hmm.
I just can't naturally write and didn't feel comfortable researching to like, I'll just figure out what it feels like to be a Chinese American in Butte who comes out as non-binary in a family that isn't into it. Like, that is a layer that I'm like, that's not my story to write unless I had someone else there to say like, you know what, if you just change this line to this is actually going to be really funny to like the people, like, you know what I mean? Like to other Chinese people who think that's funny that their parents said that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's kind of how
the
that
cultural tensions are so different,
oh my
and
God.
it's fascinating. I think there's potential, but as you said, throwing it and being open to the changes as necessary for that identity, because I think, I know with the production of Gypsy, for instance, now
Mhm.
it's conscious of that Audra is Black and Gypsy
Her
Risley is
daughters
Black,
are, yeah.
but I don't know if any of the dialogue has changed, and that is always sort of, you know, how does that, or does it work, or how's it work? I haven't seen it.
I
So
have seen it, and it totally works.
mhm.
To me, it is actually, if I may go on this tangent, there are so few people who understand how to do a reboot. And I say that, like, you can say it's hubris. I don't care. I've seen people be like, you just have to change this person and then it's a reboot. I'm like, it's more than that. You have to thread it. Especially, again, if you are acknowledging the identity of the actor, how does that domino other things in this play? And if you are into the script enough, you will find things in there that like you will now get to emphasize or spotlight that will make your thesis. And Gypsy on Broadway 100% did it. It was brilliant. The way and it was all in staging. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, it is not a movie. It's just words on a page. You can make it, emphasizing this over that changes the whole scene. And they did a masterful job at it. It was so well done. Like even just the casting of having Louise being darker than June,
Mhm.
because now everything that Mama Rose does to keep Louise out of the spotlight and put this white passing girl with a blonde wig so that they can become, stars in white vaudeville to get what they, and at Herbie is white. That's why she needed that agent, because they looked at Audra, Audra playing Mama Rose, and they're like, I don't, how at the beginning they had all these little Black kids play the newsboys. And during the montage where they all become older, Mama Rose comes on and one by one yanks these kids out and puts in these white men to surround June. And it is like, you get, I'm like, you get, that's what she's doing. And you see her do it. Didn't change a word. That's a reboot. Oh, it was so good. I was like, yeah,
That's so
it was
that's
so
so
well
cool.
done.
That's so cool to hear, because
It was very cool.
I don't know if I will get to New York in time to see it before Audra leaves. It's
Yeah.
unclear as to whether she will continue
I
or if
keep
it will
hearing
continue.
August is her end, but like, I don't know. She clearly loves doing. You know what I mean? Like it's Mama Rose. How I would never leave that role. I'd be like, I'm gonna have to die for you to replace me. So
Yeah, it is one of those for people who like musicals. There are those of it. I mean, I think we all kind of agree that it's just a brilliant. It's brilliant. There's not much we would change. I always um and you're someone who does the dramaturgical work. The fact that everything's coming up roses, an expression that Stephen Sondheim, in fact, created, much like all the terms Shakespeare created, is one of the people are surprised. It's like, what? That didn't exist? Like he didn't actually just choose the name because he to get to
right?
that. Like,
Oh
no,
no, brilliant.
it's brilliant. And yeah, I love like to do reboots to really be to acknowledge identity and do it in an interesting way is really is compelling and
Yeah,
exciting. Um, and so I people should definitely in the Seattle area or outside the Seattle area go see this. I'm sure you know, given the success of this, you will probably potentially take it elsewhere, right? If anyone folks are
absolutely.
interested. Um, the theater I'm involved with here in Portland is a former church, so good acoustics, I would imagine. So
I would love to take this to Portland. I would love to take it everywhere. I honestly like the thing that I keep like saying again, like it's, I don't have a short elevator pitch for it because unfortunately, again, I wrote a really complicated idea. And, you know, it's not just like girl leaves home, comes back. Like it's not. And I think that I keep saying that it is a show for trans people and the people who love them. Like this is, you know, there are jokes in there that people in the community are going to be like, and then cis people might not get it. But there are moments that are like for cis people in it to, and specifically of like how, like about their relationship to the trans people in their life. And I think that that, like, especially for theater audiences, like, because, you know, we say like, if you've never heard of it, like it is weird. And it's not that that's bad. It's just weird because you've never heard of it. And now let's talk about why you've never heard of it. And now that
Mhm.
you think it's weird, get over it. It's not that weird, you know, but you can have that initial reaction. It's okay. I did too. And I am this, you know,
Exactly.
and that is, I think, like a show that like is inviting to truly everyone who loves us.
Yeah. And I can attest Jasmine's a great storyteller. I will speak vaguely, but you had posted something on Facebook about someone you didn't like giving you a shovel that was I was like,
Yes.
this is a play right there. This is a
I
this is
know.
well
The
that is
shovel.
it's very good. So I'm a big fan. I'm very happy that you have been able to kind of fulfill this, to get it out there, to realize it. And so everyone go see it. And anything else, any information you want to give to folks in time we have left?
No, here and there in the musical.com and there spelled like the pronoun. But yeah, come and see us, tell people about it. Let's have some more queer art on stage.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Like, share, subscribe. We'll catch you next time. Take care.